So, Sumit, as far as I know, you're in the business of nourishing productive working environments and helping leaders develop their teams in a certain way that you feel brings out the most empowering feeling for the team itself, for the leaders, and for the product as a result. Am I right? Can you tell me a little bit about yourself, how you came from working with Yahoo and with Booking.com to being a speaker, an author, and a podcast host and inspiring teams across the globe?
Yes. So first of all, right, that's what I do. I help leaders become better leaders and then create workplaces that are not just productive, that don't just produce value, but also people have fun and build strong relationships. And my background, as you just pointed out, is in technology. So I started as an engineer. And then what happens with most engineers when they are good at what they do, they are promoted to management. And that's where I found out how incapable I was as a manager. And through that process, I started to learn and became passionate about people and understanding what drives human behavior. So over this long journey of the last 12 years, I have studied, I have researched, and I have practiced talking to people, understanding people, and applying new principles and concepts, which I now bring into my coaching, to my own personal life. So slowly I have seen myself grow. And as a result of that, from just being an engineer, I have been able to start a couple of companies. I have been able to run an NGO for a couple of years. And I have done things which I never thought I could do. So that has basically made it easier for me to bridge that gap between tech and people. And now I basically help other leaders become more human focused and do work and reveal some underlying principles that create not just more results, as I was just talking about, but also better relationships and more fun.
That's good. So the frameworks you've developed over the course of your career are based on the need to improve yourself and to find the most effective way to work with your teams.
Yes. Most of the work which I have done was initially for my own teams and my own leadership.
That's good. And what are some of the projects you're working on right now, say, regarding helping teams build environments? How are your frameworks being applied to your current projects and products?
So the frameworks always stay in the background. So most of my work is coaching leaders to deal with whatever challenges they face, but deal it from an understanding of these basic principles, which always live at the heart of human beings or human interactions. There are multiple projects that are undergoing with multiple leaders where I coach them around these foundational principles to create more productive, more aligned teams that in the end create better results for their customers.
Now, you call your framework the 4 laws of leadership. I'm interested a little bit about in how you've come to call them laws. Are they just kind of like laws of nature that come forth from the working environment themselves, or is there something there behind this?
Yeah. So I am calling them laws, but they are not like laws of physics, right? They are laws in the sense that I have found them very true and very fundamental to every human relationship. And I take the example of the law of gravity, which is a physical law, but it doesn't matter if you like gravity or not. It doesn't matter if you approve gravity or not. Right? Gravity plays a role. Similarly, these laws reveal something which play a big role behind all communication, behind all conversations, whether somebody agrees with it or not, whether somebody likes it or not. And that's why I call them law, because once you understand, a lot of things suddenly start becoming clear to you, and that allows you to do something differently than what you have always done and produce very new kind of results.
So could you give me an introduction to these 4 laws? What are they and what are their applications, specialties?
Yes. So the first law is the law of listening, which is basically that the listening is where all results happen, not in your speaking. So a lot of leaders come to me from a place of what should I speak or how do I persuade or convince somebody in my speaking. And this law basically invites people to focus on their listening rather than their speaking. and we can go jump into more details later. The second law is the law of giving, which is basically saying that everything you need to receive is something which you need to give. You need to start giving. So, for example, if I want to create more trust in a relationship, then I need to show trust first rather than asking for proof or reasons, and that builds trust. So that's the second law, which is law of giving. The third law is the law of responsibility, and which says that responsibility is always unconditional and always 100%. And so if somebody says, I will do this if, that's not taking responsibility. So responsibility does not include having any reasons or any excuses, and it's always absolute. And when people can take responsibility, like unconditional responsibility, they can produce results at a level which were like very difficult to even imagine before. And the fourth law is the law of change, which basically says that you cannot change, which might mean motivate, persuade, convince anybody. As a leader, you can only create a space or the conditions for that change or for that behavior to happen. But you cannot directly change anybody else. You can only create a space through your actions. You can only do something through your actions that other people feel invited or compelled enough to change. So these are the four laws which I have created.
So do you feel these laws are applicable to basically any team and any business, or are there some types of teams varying by size or by an industry that will benefit from the laws the most?
So these laws are applicable wherever you have human beings interacting with each other. And whenever there are relationships involved, whenever there are projects where people are working together are involved. So these laws operate at a level of human relationships. So whether it's teams or whether it's even collaboration among teams or among companies or among just two people, these laws are at play.
Mm-hmm. Okay, could you maybe give us a couple of examples of teams and businesses you're working with right now or have been working in the recent times that you feel the adoption of these laws into their culture have been a massive boost for them in terms of workplace productivity, emotional empowerment within teams, and how it translates into business metrics for those companies?
Yeah, I can give you an example of the first law of listening and how I learned the value of it. So when I was working in booking.com, I was working with people from more than 70 different nationalities. And if you would have a team of 10 people, most likely you would be working with people from 10 different countries. And what that created was, I can never be confident about what I was speaking and how the other person was listening, right? And even if I'm talking to two people, they might listen to or they might interpret what I am saying in very different ways. So I learned to focus on not on what to say or what to speak or what words to use, but on actually how others are listening to me. And then by shifting my focus on the listening, my words become irrelevant, and I was able to change, adapt, and shift my conversation style in a way that the other person listened to what I wanted to communicate. Right. So when I was unaware of this law, it was like creating a lot of misunderstandings among people. And when I practice this myself and invited my team as well to focus on how others are listening to them, the number of disagreements or the number of miscommunication or misunderstandings reduced. And because of that, all work that was being done became easier. A lot of time which was earlier wasted in endless conversations was not wasted, and it directly resulted in a betterment of the metrics of the team.
Now, speaking about the law of responsibility, jumping forward a little bit, I have a question for you. As a leader of a team working on a specific product or a service or running a business in general, as a leader for the team, does this apply primarily to me, or do I need to try and nourish my team towards being able, the leaders of my team, to be able to take responsibility 100%? And how do I balance this with interdependencies between people, between the products and processes that various people within my team are responsible for?
Yeah, so you're touching multiple areas here. Let me try to answer this, right?
Okay.
So first of all, when I am talking about responsibility, I am not talking from the sense of taking the blame when things go wrong, right? I'm simply talking about responsibility as a choice for leadership. So this is totally separated from blame. When things go wrong or when results are not produced, that's not what I am talking about. Now, when you talk about a team, right? Let's say a team has 5 people in it and there is one team leader. And then the team leader, and so everybody's responsibility is 100%. So first of all, that's right. It's never like if my team is responsible, then I will be responsible from the perspective of a leader. So if there are 6 people in the team, then the total percentage of responsibility is not 100% divided among the team members. It's 600%, which is 100% for each person. Right? And what that does is that allows everybody to operate at the maximum level of their potential in terms of taking responsibility when they notice something is not right, or when they notice that the team is not functional or functioning in a given way. And they are free, or they feel free to point it out to whoever is accountable for the results. So as a team leader, if I have a reason because of which my team is not functioning, then taking responsibility means acknowledging the reason and actually responding to that situation in a way that takes care of whatever the output the team has promised to produce, or whatever the output team has promised or committed towards. And if there are 2 people involved, what I often see, again, this might be easier to share with an example. One of the clients I was working with had this example or this situation where they were saying that I cannot be responsible because the other person I am working with is not responsible, right? And where this law played out was that if this person, who was a client of mine, took 100% responsibility and never go below 100%, even when somebody else was not being 100% responsible, then it becomes a part of their responsibility to have those conversations to address whatever communication issues were happening. And that might mean trying to resolve the issue among themselves, or that might mean escalating, but never saying that I cannot do or my team cannot do because of somebody else's responsibility, right? So again, this can be confused easily with blame, but I want to separate out the two here, because this is not 100% responsibility, is not taking blame for what is going wrong. It is basically acknowledging that in each moment I have my full responsibility or my full 100% choice to respond to the situation in a way that takes care or that produces the outcome that the team or the person has committed.
Okay. Thanks for that. It's a thinly veiled distinction sometimes, to separate blame and responsibility, and especially when trying to first build a no blame culture, shifting your focus towards responsibility rather than blame can, I think, beneficial. Now, speaking about the application of the 4 laws, let me ask you whether there are some metrics that I, as a team leader, can use to see in which of the 4 laws, which of the segments of my team's culture require more attention, whether it's listening or giving or responsibility or change. How do I gauge my team's performance while trying to nurture this environment?
Yeah, so the way I would answer is to actually focus on the key metrics which you anyways have for your team, because when all of these laws are at place, the team's results will automatically go up, right? So first of all, to have that as the main metric, whatever OKRs or whatever outcomes the team is responsible for, and then to focus on the specific elements of each of these 4 laws. This can be data collected through surveys on a regular basis, whether people feel listened to, whether people feel understood through each other or through their managers, whether people feel that they are taking as well as their leaders are taking responsibility, right? And the same for change, Do people try to force you to their ideas? Do people, is the conversations happening in a cordial space, or is there like trying to convince, trying to change? And through those surveys, you can get a sense of it. But again, I would say the best indicator of whether these laws are working to your advantage or to your disadvantage for any leader is to measure the actual results, the business results, which the team is responsible for, and then having some of those metrics as health metrics, which is how engaged are people, how happy are people, how much they trust each other, how much they listen and understand each other, how much they offer to help each other when required, and so on.
Sounds reasonable. And speaking about these metrics and the way you structure your work with your clients, what kind of a role plan or structure do you usually utilize to communicate these values to the teams?
So there are many ways these can be like communicated. And one of the ways I said was coaching, which is basically engaging in a question and answer either with an individual or with an entire team about how these elements are playing out in their teams. This might even mean sometimes going over a meeting which has just happened and then reflecting and sharing feedback with each other. Apart from that, what also happens is, as you said, right, role play. But again, role play in practicing those conversations which might be difficult for people. So if somebody feels that they don't have a choice in the matter, or they are forced or compelled to do something, then a role play might mean that person going to their manager and saying no to a particular task. And then at the same time, by saying no, basically is taking responsibility and then also engaging in a conversation to take care of whatever was this task supposed to do, either through delegating it to somebody else or to doing it in a better way or to delaying it for some time future, but actually having that conversation which might be difficult for a person to have.
And are there any, let's say, checklists or lists of key values and tenets that businesses tend to apply to subdivide the laws as a whole into a core set of rules and values that are shared by the team?
I think all of these are kind of values as well, because when you talk about listening, this is basically saying that you understand where the other person is coming from. So listening can be broken down into two. So first is, how am I listening, right? So if somebody is speaking, am I really listening to them, or am I listening to my own thoughts, or am I focusing on what do I have to say next? Right. So first of all, focusing on my own listening, that how am I listening to somebody else? Am I even listening to their concerns? Am I even listening to what's on their mind? And then am I asking questions? Am I asking curious questions to understand better where they are coming from? So that's the first level of listening. The second level of listening would be to focus on the other person and see that are they listening to what I want to communicate, like not just the words which I'm saying, but the message which I want to communicate. So listening becomes a key value, and then tied with is also compassion also. And similarly with the law of giving, right? Trust is a key element. So trusting others first without asking for proof is a key value which you can inculcate. Trust and respect for each other, irrespective of what is happening. We were talking about blame earlier, right? So learning from the mistakes without blaming a person is in itself a value, right? Because the taking responsibility actually means putting learning as a value in front of blaming or pointing out who did wrong, right? So addressing the wrong, but not focusing on the who. So we learn and we do something different so that we don't make the same mistake again, but we never blame or we never focus on who committed the mistake, right? So then that becomes a value. And for the last one, which is about change, a value could be never pulling rank, right? Or never convincing people because you have more authority, but always trying to argument, sharing your opinions, asking people for their opinions, and then making a judgment either together, or if you have that authority as a team leader to make an argument, but never push your arguments on other people. And a way to also create a value out of it is to create a value of healthy challenges among the team. right? So if you see a team challenging each other very gently on what made you think like that, what made you come up with this idea, why do you think this is the best way, could there be any other way? So in this way, all of these can also be seen as values, which could also help in measuring the behavior, as you said.
Okay. And it's interesting about the idea of sharing of ideas and giving, because in conjunction with the responsibility, the companies I've been working with mostly were giant structures that were quite inert and built on a vertical system of responsibility. So the responsibility either goes upwards to the top management level or down towards the light employees. But what you're saying is we can basically shift responsibility into giving towards helping the teams basically horizontally. Are there usually issues with trying to persuade your clients that the idea of giving more and being ready to take responsibility for someone else's part of the project if something fails that way is a good way and not a counterproductive way regarding their own careers, advancement results, and key metrics?
Yeah, so yes, obviously there are challenges. But I want to highlight, right, that these 4 laws, I call them laws of leadership and not laws of management. So these require people to be bold and courageous. And sometimes then there might be consequences, or sometimes there might be short-term results which are not positive. So let's say somebody raises their voice and expresses their opinion about what is wrong. Right? That's taking responsibility. That's pointing out something which somebody else might not be seeing. But if the culture is very top down, or if the culture is not supportive of that, then that might mean that there might be retaliation, or there might be something for that person which is not a positive result. Right? So being a leader requires you to make those bold and courageous steps, because the result that you are producing is not going to be met. Right? So you bring up something which you acknowledge might create a result which might not be in your immediate interest, but you still put the interest of the entire team or the entire organization first, and you raise that matter. So these are, again, as I said, right, these might create some short-term problems, but this is also about being brave, being courageous, and then growing as a leader. Because even if you take responsibility, 100% responsibility, and even things don't go as well as you expected, even that is a learning opportunity. That's how you grow as leaders, by not just going through successes, but also going through some hard times or going through some failures. And when people see that you're willing to take a stand for what you care about and what really matters, that builds trust, that builds up your power and authority as a leader, even if the results are not immediately in your advantage.
Just as an aside, I've been wanting to ask you, what are the usual sizes of groups you work with in coaching and role playing, but implementing these methodologies?
So most of my work is in one-on-one coaching or in small groups of less than 10 people, right? So if I'm coaching one person, then it's that person in full confidentiality. But I might also be coaching like the executive team of a company. So like everybody who is reporting to the CEO. Or I might be coaching all the team leads or managers in one department in small groups. So they might have 40 to 50 people working under them, but then I pick up the managers of all of these different teams, and then I coach them as a group and as a team in itself. So the coaching always happens in small groups or individual, where there is enough space for everybody to raise their opinions, to ask questions, to do a role play if required, and to basically learn, go out and practice in their day-to-day job, and then come back over a period of time between sessions with questions, with what is working, what is not working, what they are learning, and also sharing that. So there needs to be enough space for sharing of views, asking of questions, and dealing with things not working out, which is part of the process.
Putting myself into the shoes of a CEO, I might be willing to try and implement this culture among my C-level employees, among my team leaders. I understand that it's not really possible to teach leadership to somebody who doesn't wish to evolve, be taught, and at least try some new approaches towards leadership. But could you share with me maybe how do you often come pushback from the team leaders that you're coaching in regards to implementation of these core values?
Yeah, so this again comes back to the fourth law of change, right? That you cannot force anybody to change. You can only lead by example. And then by that process, you can invite people to practice something else. And then they have a choice to say yes or no to that, right? So as a leader, if you are the CEO and you say that I want to inculcate with this culture in my company, then either you lead by example yourself and you try to communicate the benefits, you try to show the benefits with others, either alone or working with a coach, but never forcing it on somebody, right? Never making it a requirement. Now, the second thing which happens if you realize that most of your team, most of your people are acknowledging, but there is some people who are not acknowledging of this shift, then the team as a whole can get together and decide what is the responsibility there, right? Because a leader's responsibility is also including having some tough conversations with people, right? It's also telling people that this is the whole organization where we are headed, and then you need to follow suit or something else, right? So the leader's responsibility is making things clear, very specifics. This means talking to underperformers or talking to somebody who is not on the board in a particular way. And then again, in a way that honors the other person, that never forces something on the other person, that puts the listening and the understanding of the other person first. And then that all of that includes basically taking responsibility and then dealing with whatever particular situation you have at hand.
And how long are you usually working alongside the teams you're coaching with? Is this mostly just several sessions, or are you tracking them for quite a long time?
So this is mostly long-term stuff. So this is like at least 6 months, many times even a year or more than, because first of all, change on an organizational level takes time. And then it also takes time for people to learn and change their behavior and integrate them with whatever their old leadership style or their personalities are. And then having a regular coach or having a regular bouncing board allows people to continue building their skill, continue building, because just like every skill, this requires practice. This requires that you fall down, you make some mistakes, you learn and you get better. So having continuous ongoing support of a coach or like somebody in your team itself is very critical to build up.
And could you share from your experience some of the more inspiring or surprising changes that teams have undergone within this coaching period from your experience?
Yeah, I think one brilliant example of taking responsibility is I started coaching a group of senior executives. And when they started, there was this sense of I can't do my work because the other person or the other department is not delivering on their promises. After working with them for now more than 6 months, I am already seeing a big shift happening in that even though there might be breakdowns or there might be things not going well, everybody is taking responsibility without blame and supporting each other, right? So they're talking about the same things, but they're talking about in a way that they're laughing, they're sitting at a table together, and then they are immediately looking for solutions rather than pointing fingers or like indulging in conversations which is not helping. So even if another department makes a mistake, another person is very quick to point it out to that department head, and the department head also doesn't take it personally. They basically just focus on how can we either mitigate the situation right now or what can we change so that this kind of mistake or error doesn't happen in the future. So the relationships are getting better, the results are getting better, the conversations are happening quickly because there's less wastage in like negative moods or negative emotions happening. And what I think will happen in another 6 months with them is they will start producing much more like better results on the metrics that they are already tracking.
So would you say the amount of drinks that my team has had together Friday night in a bar is a valid metric to gauge success of the implementation?
Yeah, I think if people are listening, if that helps in listening, then maybe yes. But it's the foundational laws, right? It's not about any one practice or any one conversation. If the laws are in place and they are being adhered to, then everything will become stronger. But if they are not, then the same laws can work in reverse as well. So it's very similar with gravity. If you don't agree with gravity or if you don't believe gravity, you can try to jump off buildings but never learn to fly. But when you understand gravity, then you can actually go to space by designing rockets or by designing spacecrafts around the principle of gravity. So similarly, once you learn these laws, you will stop bouncing against them in conversations and wondering what happened. In fact, you will learn to listen to those signals and you will learn to change your communication, your leadership in a way that makes use of these laws in a productive way rather than letting them work to your disadvantage.
I'm going to ask you quite a provocative question. Do you think there are teams for which such an approach to leadership is counterproductive?
So what is required? Let me answer it this way, right? What is required is, again, a level of understanding and listening and willingness to change, right? So I'm not saying this approach is the best approach for everybody. And I'm not saying that every team or every leader should take this on. One key requirement is that the leader or the company should be willing to change, should be willing to learn and try out something new and see what happens before making a snap judgment. Because if you start with a judgment that this might not work or this will not work for me, then that makes the whole thing more difficult, right? And again, the whole thing is contextual. There might be a situation where as a leader, you might have to take immediate action, especially in the moments of crisis. So as a leader, once you learn the laws, you will also learn how or when to actually break the laws, right? So these laws are for regular day-to-day conversations. But when there is a crisis, sometimes our leaders have to take very quick action or there will be damage, right? So then they cannot go and listen or they cannot go and communicate at that level of change or that level of listening, and they need to go faster. So every law has a caveat that once you learn the laws, there are situations which will be exceptional, and then you will have to deal with those situations differently. But yes, those should be the exceptions and not the norm.
So I've come into this conversation with the idea that it's a framework that I could possibly be implementing in my team to achieve some quantifiable results. However, I seem to be understanding now that it's more a personal thing, and I can basically offer my team leaders to a participation and the idea of trying a different approach to leadership, not some project that I'm implementing is a management task.
Yeah, and leadership is never one size fits all. Leadership is never about deciding one thing and then the same thing continues. This is always about learning. This is always about adapting. Like, how do you see this work out in real practice? And then as a group, as an individual, deciding to change something, right? So people come and change the value systems all the time of companies. So if you decide based on these laws, you want to inculcate certain behaviors and values, but then 6 months down the line, you want to modify or you want to add or you want to delete some of those, then that becomes a part of taking responsibility and changing that, because you are listening to something and then you're taking action based on that, right? Because these are not like once you do it once and then you forget it and everything takes care of itself. These are ongoing laws which needs to be practiced on a regular basis. And then given the situation, given the economy, given your company, given the kind of people you have, you might need to make an exception, or you might need to change even the playground or the rules under which you.
Could you point me in some direction? Let's say this, I've heard of this for laws. I think that it might be something that could benefit me in my leadership style. What would you suggest as my first steps toward understanding how to implement this? Do I basically make mental notes or maybe physical notes about situations that have been uncomfortable or challenging for me, and then try to analyze them later in the scope of the 4 laws? Or are there some basically early actions that I can make sure to do myself to see if this is the right style for me?
Yeah, so as you said, right, reflection, making some notes, either in whichever format, whichever way you prefer, over any situation which you find challenging, or where realize that there is a potential for growth, there is a potential for results, but we're not hitting there. Once you identify that, then you put your choices in the framework of these laws and ask yourself, what are you missing, right? What could you do differently? And sometimes this process involves talking to a coach, like getting or talking to the team as a whole even, and then coming up with a joint decision, again in the framework of trying something out, seeing what happens and learning from that. But yes, self-reflection, as you said, is key. Being aware of your skills, what is happening, like are you listening or not. So having that self-awareness is key, and then working with a coach who can guide you, who has been through that process, is the next level, where you get timely feedback and you're able to iterate, you're able to learn on the job as you progress.
All right. Then just to summarize and make it a nice ending to this kind of beautiful conversation, would you tell me it's maybe the most inspiring moment from your coaching career that you cherish as an example of this framework being applicable and making workplaces and teams and the world a little bit better?
Yeah, so I will give you an example of somebody I was coaching last year, and they were raising funds at that time for a project which they were doing. And they had a particular target, a number in mind of what amount they can raise as a team. And after going through a few months of coaching, they changed their number into 10. So they realized that as a team, we can make 10 times more impact. So we wanted to raise 10 times more money. And that clearly come out of them taking responsibility for the change that they wanted to produce in the world. So earlier they were coming from this place that I want to do this, but then they were pointing fingers towards what is happening in their company, but also in the society as a whole. And because of this, they wanted to play safe. The moment they were able to take responsibility, they were able to set a bold and audacious goal, which was 10 times more than before. And as they went out to raise those funds, they didn't hit that target, but they were able to raise 7x what they were initially targeting. And that's huge, massively compared to where they started with. And the energy of the team after producing like that 7x number in funds, but also the impact which they created in the society was massive, because everybody was then super confident. Everybody was very happy. They felt meaningful of contributing something to the society, and they saw that they can do much more than what they were thinking like just 3 months ago before they started. So that changed all their future planning processes for their business, but also for other social activities or other activities which they were doing as a team, as a company.
Thanks. And lastly, I would like to try and ask you to challenge me as a team leader to do something different in a different way next time I'm faced with the leadership challenge. What would you offer? What would you suggest I do to make sure that I'm trying to expand my leadership abilities and break them all just a tiny bit?
Yeah, I think asking for feedback directly is one thing which is often challenging, especially if you ask people, right, can you share when I am not taking responsibility? Or can you share when I was not listening to you? Right? And that obviously includes creating the space where people feel safe to share that with you, but asking very direct questions about what could you do more in terms of understanding and listening to people around you. Asking, and sometimes that means sharing. Sometimes that means sharing something very personal, very emotional for yourself. If you experience fear about something or somebody, then sharing that with other people as well, because that creates that openness for them to share back. So asking for direct feedback from the people you work with, and then also being more self-aware, which also can be challenging sometimes. So identifying a particular situation which you felt could have been better, reflecting over it in terms of the 4 laws, what could you have done differently? And then maybe going out to that person and saying that I have this notion, would you have responded better if I had reacted this way? Right? It might also mean apologizing to somebody, which again is sometimes not easy. It might also mean saying that I don't know, right? I'm asking for help. So this is what I am responsible for, but I don't know what is the best way. So let's have a conversation around it. So sharing your weakness or so-called weaknesses, right? Because these things actually create strong teams, powerful teams. For a leader to say, I don't know, I need help, is a very powerful step. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. But as you said, right, it might be challenging or it might be provocative to do it and to put it into practice.
Well, challenging yourself is how we grow as a leader and as a human being. Sumit, thanks a lot for your time. Tell us where we can find you online.
So I'm quite available on LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active. And then I also have a newsletter and a podcast, which is there on my website called deployyourself.com.